Hi everybody, just a simple at-home project today. I'm going to attempt to show you guys how to build a very basic birdhouse. I've got two small ones behind me in my backyard using minimal tools because I don't have access to a shop right now. Because we're working with wood, you're going to need a saw of some sort, some way to cut things. If you have access to power tools like a chop saw, table saw, jigsaw, circular saw, or any of that stuff, awesome. You're going to want a hammer and some nails. The size of the nails that you pick should be based on the thickness of your material. You should have nails that are at least thick enough to go through your wood and into the other piece. To secure that, you don't have to, but this may help. I'm going to be using a little bit of wood glue. You could also use white glue or whatever you remember from elementary school. That's just a bonus. A drill, if you have it of some sort. We need to add some kind of hole for birds to get in. A clamp, if you have it. And I have a couple different measuring devices here, like a speed square, a regular square, a rule or ruler, and I've got some scrap lumber. For this project, I'm going to be using some reclaimed lumber from old pallet material. I personally like the fact that it's got nails and all sorts of dents and stuff in it. It's going to give the final project a little bit of character. I got this from a local flooring store where they're just throwing away pallets or they're recycling them. And I gladly took them off their hands. I'm going to be needing 3 of these pieces of pallet wood. 2 of them are going to get laminated together, which means they're going to be glued together here. These are each 3 inches wide. So when I laminate these 2 together, it'll give me a total of 6 inches. Since that's 3, I'm going to be designing the plans specifically around the material I have. If you have different material, change up your plans. It's a birdhouse. It's literally just a box with a hole in it. I'm not even worrying about how flat these are. I'm not running it through a jointer. I don't have a hand plane or anything to smooth this out. So I'm just going to keep it as simple as possible. I'm going to lay a strip of glue along these. And if you don't have glue, that's fine. You can just use nails and hold these together. Conversation anyway. I'm just using my basic little table here from Canadian Tire to try to glue this up. Do your best to get the boards as flat as possible. We're not running this through a planer or anything. Oh yeah, we got a little bit of glue squishing. This is good. Do your best to keep this flat. You don't want the boards coming together squished up like this. Every little bit of pressure that you can add will help with this. These are holding a little bit better than my little table. So there we have a very basic lamination. I'm going to go ahead and wipe up this extra glue so that I don't have to scrape it off later. I can sand it, do something to it later, but this is good for now. Now while I'm waiting for the other pieces to dry with the glue, I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 pieces out for the sides of this project. I'll be using just a saw that I picked up at Home Depot and some measuring tools to lay it out. I'm going to start off by measuring 6 inches from the edge. Draw a straight line. If you don't have one of these, just do your best. Want to make your life easier? Always clamp as close to where you're cutting. You can see your line and you can start your cut. I always try to start on an angle. I'm going to just start going back a little bit just to kind of score with where I want it to go. Go ahead, cut another one of those out. Two pieces ready for the side. Okay, so the glue has dried. It's gone for a full day overnight here. So let's get this all unclamped. Doesn't fall apart. And now this is the time where we want to maybe give it a little light sanding so we don't have to do it all later. Since it's all in one piece right now, not a bad idea to just sand this whole thing down. So I've got some extra sandpaper kicking around at home. It's not the ideal ones that I normally use, but I could take this, wrap it in maybe that block that I used earlier, give this a quick sanding. If you're lucky enough, you may have a power sander. That can make this a little bit quicker. If you want to make sure that you're sanding enough, feel free to take a pencil, put a couple lines on there, and use that as a guide for when to stop sanding. You'll know that you've done enough when the pencil has gone away, or that it feels smooth. I am leaving some of these little interesting things like nails in there. After sanding this, it's super nice and smooth. Now, you might want that rustic looking type of wood and you might not want to sand it, but that's up to you. But here's the difference. Nice and smooth versus the other side, which hasn't been touched. Still very rough. Now, you can see some of the spots here have some nails. I might take some of them out, but I might leave some depending on where the cuts are, just to give the final project a little bit of character. Plus, if this is on the inside, nobody's going to see it, versus this, a lot smoother. So again, rough side, still got marks in it. Smooth side, same piece of wood. This one just looks a lot nicer. Now it's time to cut out some pieces. I'm going to start with the front and back piece. That's going to be the piece that is 6 inches long and has two 45-degree angle cuts on it. I kind of wanted to keep this as part of it, but it's because it's at the end of the board, it's probably going to get chopped off. So let's go ahead and measure out 6 inches. I'm just using a speed square, but you can also use your tape measure or a ruler, and we want to get a nice line across here. So I have my 6 inches laid out. Let's lay out our 45s. If the boards aren't perfectly flat, which in my case luckily they are, just measure from 1 and then make your lines line up. Now if you don't have a speed square to be able to get a 45, the other way to do this is to measure 3 inches, because if this is 6 inches here, this is 3 inches here. If I measure down 3 and connect them, you should be getting a perfect 45-degree angle cut. So let's go ahead and measure out 3. And to make sure it lines up on the other side in the same place, I'm going to line it up with my square and then connect them both right in the middle here. I'll do one with a ruler and I'll do one with a speed square, just to show both ways of doing this. And also, it is a birdhouse. It's okay if it's not perfect. Now for cutting this out, you could use a saw, a jigsaw, or if you have a chop saw, you could use that as well. I'll start with one here with my hand saw. It's always a good idea to cut on the waist side rather than here. If you make it too small, you can't really glue it back together very easily. So I'm going to take it nice and slow. I do wish this had finer teeth. Okay, my cut wasn't quite perfect, so I have a little bit of sanding to do here. I'm going to show this one. So this saw has been a little bit rough. Definitely great for cutting trees and stuff, or branches in my yard, but I'm gonna try one with a finer tooth. I found this in one of my toolboxes. Very fine. This is more of a bimetal blade. It's probably gonna go a lot slower, but let's see how it does. Take your time, get that cut started. I wanna go as slow as I can to get a decent straight cut. That means less work for me later. Nice, that one worked out pretty good. Go ahead and lay out the rest of your pieces, get them cut out. I'm not going to film all of that. You've seen how to do that already. All right, so I've got all my pieces cut out at least to the proper length. Some are a little bit rough, that's okay. There's only so much you can do with a handsaw. I do have 2 pieces that are actually going to have to be slightly less width. So my bottom piece, that's going to be going underneath, kind of, to prevent birds from falling at the bottom. It's still going to be 6 inches long, and my width is going to be 4 3/4. So that's going to get a cut about here. My 2 9-inch pieces, which are going to be the lid or the roof of this thing, they are still going to be 9 inches, and one of them I'm just going to take off about 1/2 inch. This side's flatter, so I'm going to use that as my good edge and cut this one off. Now the reason that I have to get rid of that piece is because when the walls are put up, if you look at our total width, that's going to be like that, here and here. I want this bottom piece to be able to fit inside with these on the edges. It's going to be easier to nail those together. Take my time so I have less sanding, but if it is a little small, that's actually okay. So there we have a basic container. Geez, I could turn this into a toolbox. So just kind of rough fit. Now it's not going to fit perfectly because these boards, they were not perfectly flat to begin with, but that's okay. This is a birdhouse. You want to have a little bit of breathing room or some room for water drainage. Now before I go ahead and nail these together, I will add a little bit of glue. Because this is end grain and I am gluing it to a face, all the glue is just going to get sucked up in here. So to help with that, I'm going to add a little bit of glue here, let it get soaked in. Now you can do this whole project without glue, that's fine, but I just wanted to give it a little extra protection, less chance of it falling apart. I'm going to let that glue soak in there for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to do the other side as well. So I added glue to the end grain of each of these pieces because I knew it would get sucked up. Let's take a closer look, shall we? So here's a piece that has had the end grain glued up. If you look really closely, you can really see those ridges. It is not perfectly flat. There's a couple little bumps in there, and that's where that glue is being sucked up into. Over to the fresher one. This one hasn't had quite as much time to dry. You can still see how here it's still kind of wet. It hasn't fully got sucked in. But in a couple spots, you can really see it. So I've got two different sizes of nails here. We've got 1 inch and 1 1/4. Some of them are just framing nails, some of them are finishing nails, but it doesn't matter. Either way, let's take a look at the length. Our shorter one, clearly, it's shorter, right? That's a no-brainer. Then I have a longer one. It's longer than the shorter one. Okay, that was intense. Let's look at why I've chosen these potential two. The length of nail is going to make a difference in how strong this project is going to be. Using the shorter nail will be easier, but in the long run, the longer nail is going to give it a little bit more bite into its piece that it's mating up to. So I'm going to be using the longer nail. That glue has mostly gone tacky, and that might help a little bit with this process. So let's see how it goes. Hardest part about doing this, when you're not using something like an electric nailer and stuff, is it's hard to hold it together while hammering. So I'm going to try to find a way to hold this together using my bench here and stuff, and we'll see how it goes. Now, sometimes just smashing through here, things are going to move. So I'm going to put the nails here until they are just poking out the edge and there's a little point. I'm aiming to have this kind of an even space, so I need to make sure my nails are lined up in a good spot. If I want, I can put on just a very thin line that I can sand off later to give me an idea of where I want to put my nails. Ideally, I want them evenly spaced so it looks nice. I do want this to look a little bit nice when it's all done. Just want to hit it through until it pokes out the other side, not until it gets stuck to the piece of wood. So I went a little bit farther than I wanted to, just enough. Perfect. All four of them are just poking through the other side. All right, I'm going to line up my bottom edges here. Because that nail is poking through just a little bit, it's going to give it a little bit of bite so it doesn't move left and right. There we go. And see, I can give it a little push and it doesn't want to go anywhere. There we go. That's a nice edge right there. Line it up as best I can. I'm having this hanging off the edge so it actually fits. That worked out nicely. Give it that little strip of glue. Even though some of it's going to get sucked up in there, it may help. Even a little bit is good. Line up my bottom edge. There we go. We've got our two pieces here. All right, next we can test our bottom and see if we need to do any trimming. This is rough lumber, so it's not perfectly straight in some spots. If we're lucky, it should just fit in. Excellent. And we'll pop some nails in the front and the back. Now I'm going to have the rough side be the inside because you're not going to see it. There's going to be some gaps, and that is fine for this project. Take your time setting your first couple nails to make sure everything is lined up the way you want. It's much more difficult to pull these out once they're definitely in there. Don't hit your thumb. That would be silly. If you want to use the floor or somewhere more sturdy, that's good too. Double check that you haven't had any nails pop through the other side. Good. Excellent. Now the glue is probably not going to do a great job because of the fit and the wood isn't perfectly flat. But really, as long as those nails are in there, a little bit of glue will help. Now before I go ahead and add my lid, which is going to give us this nice shape here, I've got a couple little finishing details that I want to do. One, I want to do as much sanding here as I can before I nail these on, because it's going to be difficult to get my sanding block or a power tool in there to do the sanding. I want to round over the edges, give it a bit more of a rustic look compared to that clean, straight look. I'm going to round just about everything over. Now when I do put these on, I'm not going to line it up like this with the top. I'm going to have one slightly overlapping the other. If I do that, because they're both 6 inches wide, one of them is going to hang down longer than the other. So it's going to require a trim. All right, the width of my material varies between 1/2 inch and 5/8. So I'm just going to bring this down to 5.5 inches in width. We'll chop that off, smooth over the edges, and then we're going to be almost ready for assembly. Again, if it's a little bit off, I don't think the birds are going to care. This is definitely a functional project. Let's get all these sanded up before we assemble. We've got that all sanded up, smoothed out. Now it's very important that I remember to put this together the correct way, since I've made one of these less wide than the other. So this one is still 6 inches wide, this one is 5.5. This one is going to be sitting here. I'm gonna be having a small overhang here, as well as I want the back to be flush so that it could go up against a fence or something like that. Just gonna pause for a moment. Here's another birdhouse that I've got in the backyard. And what's holding it on the fence? Well, there's a small strip of wood. And apparently I have wind chimes I just bumped into. I have a small strip of wood that is just nailed to the back of this birdhouse and is held on with a single screw so it doesn't go anywhere. I probably shouldn't shake it in case there's, birds. If it's up like this, it won't be able to attach to a fence. So I'm gonna go ahead and figure out where my nails are gonna be going, pre-hammer them through like I did before, and then I can start assembling this. There we go, I've got my nails just sticking out the side there. Add a little bit of glue. Probably don't need it, but why not? Just a little bit. Now before I go and hammer these in completely, I want to make sure that my other piece will overlap nicely here. There we go. I do like that there's a little bit of space. Gives it a little bit more of a rough look. But there we go. A little bit more flush. Go about there. That's about what I want. Let's hammer those in. Double check, has anything shifted? Does it still seem flush enough for me? That's pretty good, I like that. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and hammer the rest of these. There we go, we got a little sunroof on this side. Let's fix that. Again, figure out where my holes are gonna be going. I've got those hammered through. Add a very small strip of glue. You probably don't need any, but why not? There we go. Look at that. A finished birdhouse. Oh, yeah. We need a hole in there. I'm going to be using a 1 1/4 inch hole saw here. I'm going to be sticking it just above where that angle starts. Try to line it up in the center. It would look silly over here unless that's part of your design, but I'm going to line it up roughly about there. Anytime you're using power tools, again, keep your finger off that trigger until you're ready to play. Wear your safety glasses. If you need a dust mask, You should be wearing that anyways right now. Take your time, get it lined up. Let's let that cool down a little bit. I think my teeth are getting gummed up. Slow down near the end so it doesn't destroy the inside too much. Unfortunately, that little block of wood just fell down onto the inside. Anybody play guitar? Try to get guitar picks out of your thing? Well, maybe I'll just leave that piece in there for the bird. Okay, last step, I'm just gonna quickly chamfer the edge with a little bit of sandpaper and a pencil. That is basically the completed birdhouse. The only extra things that you'd add if you want would be a strip of wood along the back so that you could nail or screw it into a post. You could also drill a small hole here, stick a dowel or a pencil or a piece of scrap wood, anything that lets a bird sit there with its feet. Other than that though, this thing's ready to either stain or paint or whatever you'd want to do to it. I'm gonna leave this one rough wood and let the outside weather and everything, literally weather the outside of this until it looks a little bit more natural and rustic and worn. Again, super simple project with almost only hand tools. I think the only power tool I used was the drill and my sander. You can do without those things, but drilling the hole is a little bit trickier unless you've got a bit more of the old school egg beater style drill. I hope you enjoyed. See you next time.